ほら、ルフィ、今一緒に海賊になる仲間を探してるんだ。
Hello guys, welcome to my channel The Wandering Zoro, your go-to destination for anime-related content. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out on our latest videos. In today's video, we're going to be diving into part 9 of the series. So be sure to stick around until the end, and let's get started. The next morning, Izuku woke up and headed to the hospital where Eri was staying to visit her, as he had promised. He went alone with a bag filled with empty notebooks and a few crayons for her to pass the time with. He wasn't sure what else he could bring her while she stayed at the hospital, but he hoped that would bring a smile to her face. He arrived and signed in as a visitor. The receptionist recognized him from the day before and waved him in with a warm smile. The hospital was one of the many locations with heightened security due to its patients. He noticed there were 2 small-time heroes at each end of the floor when he got off the elevator on Eri's floor. He was pleased to see Aizawa had taken his words to heart. He knocked on the door to her room and slid it open to see her seated in the bed. He smiled brilliantly at her in greeting, and her eyes shone at seeing him again. "Izuku, you came back." "Of course I did. I promised, didn't I?" He sat down next to her bed and pulled his bag off his shoulder. "Here, I got these for you. I guessed it might be boring to stay in here all the time." Eri took the notebooks and crayons in hand. "For me?" She looked up. "Yep. You can keep that and draw or write whatever you want," he said with a smile. She ran her hand over her new notebooks and opened one. "Thank you," she said softly. Izuku just smiled and nodded. He went on to ask her about her day so far and how she has been doing. She told him it was all right for the most part with the nice nurses, but scary in a new place with strangers. He nodded along and chatted with her for the rest of the time together. He drew with her in the notebooks and told her about his plans to be a hero. She listened to every word, and when Izuku saw she didn't understand something, he explained it. He could see she wasn't used to asking questions, or maybe allowed to ask them, so he explained when he could for her. He stopped when he got a call, and he checked to see who it was. He furrowed his brows at the unknown number and answered without saying anything. The voice on the other end was recognizable. "Hello? This is Principal Nizu calling." A higher-pitched voice came out of the speaker. Izuku curled his lips slightly and answered. "Yes," he said curtly. "I want to have a meeting with you as soon as possible to talk about your request to Fat Gum." His jovial tone didn't drop. "Be there in 2 hours." "Wonderful. See you then." Izuku scowled at the phone in his hands and how the Chimera had his phone number, but he wiped the look off his face and turned to Eri. "I've got to go very soon, but I will be back another day, all right?" Eri looked apprehensive for a moment, but then nodded. She looked down at the notebook she was drawing in. It pained Izuku to see her like that. "How would you like it if I brought some of my friends with me next time?" She looked up at him. "Friends?" He smiled warmly at her and pulled out his phone to show her some pictures. He told them their names in the group photo taken in the woods months back. "They are my closest friends," he said smiling. "Are they nice? Like you? I think they're even nicer than me. How about it?" "Okay," she said softly. He patted her head with a smile and headed out to meet with the principal of UA. He thought about the Chimera and what he might have planned. The trip back to UA was uneventful. It was nearing midday as he walked through the barrier of the school and into the main building. He walked up to the door with his senses active. It was slightly hard to see on the other side of the door. His guess was the room was insulated, but switching from thermal sense to stamina showed 2 entities inside. One entity's stamina was low and the other was at the standard of everyone else. He knocked on the door and it opened to show Aizawa and Nizu waiting for him. "Midoriya, so nice of you to join us. Please sit." Nizu motioned him to a couch across from Aizawa. "Tea." He sat down and kept his senses trained on Aizawa after scanning the room with all of the different energies he had. He declined the offer of tea by shaking his head. "What is it you wanted to discuss?" "Straight to business. Very well." Nizu finished pouring his tea and took a sip. "Why is it you want Eri to be brought to UA?" "So I can help her control her quirk, and she has become emotionally attached to me. Also, I see it to be the best option for her to be safe near me," Izuku said concisely. "Safe near you? Not UA?" Aizawa asked. "How many attacks has UA warded off?" Izuku shot the hero a look. "Watch it," Aizawa warned, and was about to activate his quirk, but Izuku was shrouded in the darkest black. His quirk had no effect and Izuku turned to Nizu, disregarding Aizawa. Nizu watched carefully the interaction between the two and turned to Izuku, whose body was hidden by a coating of void. And you would be willing to watch over young Eri? What? Nizu lost his advantage in reading people with the student's quirk activated. Izuku was quiet for a moment as he stared at the chimera. Because I want to help her, simple as that. And it was the truth. Izuku wanted to help Eri have a normal life away from the abuse and torture she had to endure. Nizu hummed in thought and sat back in his chair. Very well, I will take this into consideration. He paused and asked, Is there anything else you would like to talk about? It was a shot in the dark to gain the boy's trust. Izuku stopped from getting up and stared at Nizu through his shroud of the void. He watched him even more closely with his quirk, sensing his thermal energy rise with his emotions. His electric energy was quite different from everyone else due to Nizu's quirk, high specs. Izuku could see the equivalent emotion to anxiousness as to humans on Nizu. How is it that Mirio Togata has another quirk? Nizu's temperature rose inside his body as he finished the last word. Aizawa furrowed his brow in confusion and looked between the blotch of the void and his boss, who was eerily still. He didn't speak and was in favor of listening carefully. Nizu's mind was alive with hundreds of thoughts going through his head at what the boy had just asked. It was a possible mistake to ask for the beginning of the olive branch, but if Nizu could have Izuku Midoriya as an ally to fight all for one once again. Before Nizu could open his mouth again to break the silence, Izuku's hand rose to stop anything. If that is too difficult to answer, let me ask this instead. Is he part of All for One? The villain All Might fought in the Kamino Ward to save Katsuki. Izuku sensed the temperature in Nizu's body dim slightly on his extremities, which gave Izuku enough of an answer. He is a good ally to fight against him should the need arise, Nizu said neutrally. You know, I've researched the boogeyman of the first Quirk era. It was incredibly fascinating to read about a man with the ability to take away people's curses and give them to others to gain their loyalty. It was ingenious to do so while gaining his power. He kept anything that he fancied while giving out the dregs to his followers. Izuku rambled on in the true interest of the villain. What is your point, Midoriya? Aizawa cut in. Izuku's mouth clamped shut, and he glared at Aizawa with a little distaste for interrupting his thought process. My point is Mirio not a follower of All for One? Mirio said himself that his quirk evolved recently, and Izuku could confirm that by watching his second year's sports festival and then his third year where he showed off his new strength and speed. Izuku sensed Nizu relax slightly in his chair with his electrical energy dying down in the chimera's mind. I can assure you that Mirio isn't a follower of All for One, although I must commend your research. Nizu tried to steer the conversation away from the villain. Izuku furrowed his brow as he thought about the subject. He knows Nizu isn't an idiot who would risk having a follower of All for One in his school, much less if the person in question was powerful to the degree Mirio is. But All for One would have had a tight leash on anyone that powerful, so why doesn't he? Why wouldn't All for One be able to control Mirio after giving him the quirk? He didn't get the quirk from All for One, Izuku said softly to himself. His quirk trained on Nizu confirmed that theory as his mind spun up again. Before Nizu could get a word in, he heard Midoriya talk to himself. Then who? Nizu's mind began to run faster as the boy began to piece together a puzzle. Izuku stood up in need of having something to write down. He needed to research his theory of Mirio getting a quirk from someone. He pulled his phone out to begin his research on who it might be, but it was snatched away from his grasp by Aizawa, who was signaled by Nizu to stop him. You need some sleep. Izuku flicked his wrist, and the remaining stamina in his teacher's body drained away. He slumped over on the couch, dead to the world as he walked by, and took his phone back to begin his new objective. Nizu was alarmed at seeing his staff member fall over without a sound or a touch from anyone. Why do you want to know who gave Mirio his quirk? Izuku didn't turn as he typed away at his phone to make notes. Because you sparked my curiosity, and it would be a good idea to know where the next symbol of peace got his second quirk. His pace slowed and came to a stop as he said the last phrase. His brow furrowed under his shroud, and he pinched his lip in thought. Mirio interned only under Sir Naitai, a man who saw All Might as a deity. His mind began to make connections, but it was all conjecture at the moment. He began to move again to the door, but it was locked when he tried to open it. The door is locked, It would be better if you unlocked it before I did. Half of his mind is on the world around him, and the other half on thinking about Mirio's quirk. What will you do once you find out? What is your end goal? With the information, most likely nothing. But I like to know everything I can about everyone near me, and most especially the most powerful people, so, if they step out of line. Well, you saw how that ended with Katsuki, so much for that. Izuku said with his lip curdling at the thought of the blonde. As for my end goal, he paused and thought about his various plans. I have a few. Now the door. The door clicked and Izuku strolled out and headed to his room to write down his thoughts. Not once did he remember to turn off his shroud. Nizu rubbed his snout in frustration after Midoriya had left. Nizu had a few ideas to gain his trust, but after speaking to him, he knew none of them would work. His thoughts on having him become a ward of the school would only lead to misfortune on their part should they misstep. Nizu understood the distrust of the boy. He experienced the same problem when he escaped the lab. Nizu had watched Izuku Midoriya carefully since the beginning of the year when he appeared to have a quirk even when his file had said he was quirkless. It is quite ironic that they spoke, but all for one's followers when they were thinking he was one himself at the beginning of the school year. Now he found a close circle of friends with whom he could lower his guard while elevating their power with his quirk theory. He had seen the bottom two shoot up from 19th and 20th rank in the classroom to 16th and 17th with the others in his circle rising as well. That's not to mention their power with their quirks. Nizu sighed and pulled out a cigarette to smoke as he watched one of the few people able to stop Midoriya asleep on his couch. It was obvious to him that he gained more energies from how easily he dealt with Eraserhead. Nizu pulled out a ball he played with while thinking and threw it at Aizawa's head to wake him up, but it bounced off without him stirring. He could only guess what Midoriya did to Eraserhead. Izuku walked back to the dorms with his mind in the clouds. He didn't pay any mind to anyone who gave him odd looks due to his void shroud that he forgot to turn off. He walked into the dorms, and everyone went quiet at seeing a humanoid shape made of void. For Izuku's part, he didn't even notice as his thoughts were still on Mirio and where he got his quirk from. Nizu all but confirmed it during their conversation not long ago. He was brought out of his thoughts by someone stepping in front of his path to his room. He saw it was Ida, and he was in a combat stance. Izuku's lip curled slightly at the obnoxious boy. Who are you, and what are you doing here? Ida asked. What? Izuku asked with a scowl at the boy. He looked down at himself and saw the void covering. Oh, he dispelled it. Forgot about that. He looked around to see the classmates in the common room relax their tense postures at seeing a stranger walk into the dorms. He waved as an apology for scaring them and moved to walk past Ida. He stopped Izuku again. What kind of sick joke was that? Ida asked with distaste. Simple mistake, Izuku muttered absent-mindedly and walked past him with his mind going back to Mirio. He felt like there was a connection between Mirio and All Might through Sir Naitai. But his thoughts were brought back to Ida as he stopped him again. He didn't hear what he said, but it was something along the lines of his negligence of quirk use. He scowled again and used his quirk properly to silence the surrounding area around him and walked past Ida, ignoring his waving arms. Izuku opened his room and sat down at his desk where his laptop was, and he grabbed an empty notebook to begin his research. First, he went to watch Mirio's past sports festival from every year to truly get an understanding of his quirk. He already had an outline of Mirio's quirk and how he developed it, but now he was looking at his history and who he associated with. Tamaki is one of his oldest friends from what Izuku gleaned with their time together under Fat Gum, with Nijire joining the two at UA. All of them became close friends due to their supposedly weak quirks in their first year, but after 2 more years, they grew to become the Big Three. Mirio's internship began with Sir Naitai in his first year, and the hero mentored Mirio ever since. But the question is, why would Sir invite Mirio as an intern if Sir's way of doing things was meticulously and with long planning, while Mirio was more headstrong? Granted, Mirio has learned more of Sir's way of doing things, but he isn't an investigator like Sir is. Izuku stopped writing and leaned back in his chair with a sigh. He was startled when he felt a kiss on his cheek and turned around to see Toru and the rest of his friends in his room. His sound absorption stopped, and he looked at them with surprise. Mina and Toru were on Izuku's bed with Toru seated against the headboard, while Mina was lying face down reading a manga. Denki and Hanta had brought beanbag chairs and were reading comic books or had manga in hand. They looked around when the sound worked again. What are you guys doing in here? Izuku asked, still startled from seeing them where he thought he was. Alone. You looked kinda mad back there, and we came up here to check on you, but you were lost in the sauce. So we let you be and hung out here. Hanta said first. Yeah, Mina over here brought the manga, but it's all trashy rom-coms, Denki complained. If you don't like it, then give it back. Denki batted her hand away and rolled away to keep reading. I'm not done yet. So what's got you riled up? Toru asked her boyfriend. Izuku smiled at all of them and waved their concerns away. Just doing some profiling, like Mina likes to call it. There's a connection between Mirio and All Might, but I don't see it. Mina hummed in thought and looked over Izuku's shoulder at Mirio's face from the third-year sports festival. Other than he looks kinda like him, I've got no clue. Mina shrugged and grabbed one of his pillows to continue her reading. Why are you so curious, Izuku? Zuku. Toru asked him, but he was staring at Mirio's photo. Oh, he's in the sauce again. Gotta give him another kiss to bring him out. Hanta teased Toru. Izuku scooted forward again and began to type away in his laptop. Toru giggled at his serious face and let him work on whatever he was working on. She sat on his bed and then snatched one of Izuku's pillows from Mina. She leaned back on it to continue her reading. The longer Izuku stared at Mirio's face, the more he could see the similarity between him and All Might. The blonde hair, bright smile, high spirits, and his catchphrase. It all was just like a younger version of All Might. Izuku searched back to when Sir and All Might went their separate ways, and it was over 5 years ago, the same time as All Might took a break for the first time in years, and his appearance began to diminish. Sir wanted a copy of All Might because he saw that the symbol of peace's time was coming to an end. Izuku stopped writing and furrowed his brow. Unknowingly, he also stopped muttering, which caused his friend to look at him. What is All Might's quirk? Izuku already knew everything he wanted to know about the man, and he was becoming very aware of the similar powers between Mirio's evolution and All Might's quirk. You all right there? Denki asked worriedly. I'll be back, Izuku said to them and leapt out the balcony to blast off to the school library. He heard shouts of alarm about his actions from his friends, but he paid them no mind. He quickly arrived at the library of UA, and he began by going to the terminal to search what he was looking for. He typed in the search bar the year All Might graduated and quickly went to find a yearbook. He pulled it out. It was worn down by the many students doing something similar to what he was doing. He sat down with the book and flipped it open to find Yagi Tashinori's smiling face with his hero's name right under it. For most hero students, they got a page dedicated to them about where they came from and what their inspiration were to become a hero. He knew this from one day looking around the library when he was bored. Izuku found where Yagi Tashinori came from and wrote it on a notepad he brought. He was about to close the yearbook when he stopped and reread a line from All Might's inspirations. My biggest inspiration is and always will be Ms. Maverick. I will always strive to be what she showed me I could be. Izuku stared at that name and memorized it before writing it down as well. His gut feeling was that there was more to All Might's quirk, and it was the answer to where Mirio got his second quirk. He put the yearbook away and headed back to his room. He startled Denki when he came in from the balcony, which caused him to crush the bag of chips he was eating. And where did you go? Toru had her hands on her hips and stared down Izuku. For his part, Izuku froze and looked around the room. Mina was hiding a smirk while Denki was picking up chips from the ground and eating them quickly. Hanta had his eyebrow raised with a smirk at the two. To the library? Well, you didn't have to give me a heart attack by jumping off the balcony. Toru pouted with her arms crossed. She turned her face away from him. I'm sorry. I won't do that again, Izuku said apologetically. Toru peeked at him and nodded with satisfaction. Good. I don't want to see you jumping off high places again. She went over to hug him after admonishing him. Oh, like an old married couple. How adorable. Mina cooed with both hands clasped together in front of her. Izuku blushed at the mention of marriage with Toru, and the rising heat on her face gave Izuku the sense she was in the same boat. They separated and got back to what they were doing before, with Izuku at his computer and Toru snuggling under his bed covers. The absorber rubbed his face to get his mind back on track from Mina's remark. First, he wanted to search for the school Yagi Tashinori graduated from before UA. He had the school district, and he went from there. It took him a couple of hours to find where Yagi Tashinori went to school before UA, since they all have been closed down or renamed for one reason or another. His way of finding it was to search the digital yearbook of each school of the year he should have graduated from. There were many schools in the district, but his dedication bared fruit when he found a scrawny young man's photo with a matching name. The same blue eyes and golden blonde hair had a plain smile in the yearbook photos. The school he went to closed down for unknown reasons. Izuku began to scour the internet for any additional information that contained Yagi Tashinori. Before he could continue, he heard a tapping noise and Izuku looked up to see Mina, Denki, and Hanta waving at him from his doorway. He looked confused and looked over to where Mina was pointing with a beaming smile. Toru was under his bed sheets asleep, and it was dark out the window. Izuku kept quiet and waved to his friends. When they left, Izuku glanced over at Toru, who was drooling on his pillow with a smile. He smiled warmly at her, and then got back to work to find the truth about All Might's quirk. The rest of the gang closed the door quietly and tiptoed downstairs. It was nearing 10 at night when they decided to leave Toru and Izuku. What do you think got Izuku going on his research? Denki asked when they were one floor down. Not sure, but he looked determined, that's for sure, Mina said. Did you see what he was looking at? Denki asked. The three were making their way to the kitchen for a late-night snack before bed. All Might and that Mirio guy, Hanta spoke quietly. He was searching for All Might's quirk. I heard him faintly before he leapt off the balcony. They were quiet for a moment as they snatched things to eat before bed. Should we be worried? Mina asked. We'll keep an eye on him. Hanta nodded. Toru woke up to a familiar bed and her hair sticking everywhere. She groaned softly before rolling over to hug Izuku, but she found nothing. Confused, she felt around until she raised her head with one eye opened slightly to look around. She found Izuku immediately right where she last saw him, at his desk. He had bags under his eyes from the lack of sleep, and he was writing furiously while looking up at his computer screen frequently. He was quietly mumbling to himself to prevent waking her up. Izuku, have you been there the whole night? She mumbled while rubbing her eyes clear of sleep. He was startled from his work and looked over to Toru, staring at him with disapproval. It's fine. The stamina energy helped to keep the sleep away. How did you sleep? He asked with a smile. Toru pursed her lips at his behavior and skipping sleep. Good, but it could have been better. She pouted. Izuku ducked his head. Sorry, I lost track of time. He said apologetically. Anyways, it's fine. It's the weekend. He tried to appease her. Still, you shouldn't cut out sleep entirely like that. I know. I just... He waved his hand at the open notebooks that were filled with new notes. Did you eat at least? She didn't get an answer, and she intensified her glare. Izuku, she almost shouted. I forgot. Toru got up from his bed. She arranged her hair so it wouldn't bother her, and straightened her wrinkled clothes before grabbing Izuku by the arm and dragging him to the door. After breakfast, you will sleep. Wait, Toru. Give me a chance to put my notes away at least. Izuku pleaded. She squinted her eyes at him and crossed her arms. He quickly grabbed everything on his desk and put it inside a complex-looking box that opened after some button pushes. He pushed the heavy box back into his closet and closed it. Izuku turned to see Toru with an eyebrow raised at his actions, and he waved her concerns away. He was then dragged downstairs to the kitchen where a few of his classmates were already seated and eating. Toru sat Izuku down and began to grab ingredients to cook a breakfast. When Izuku tried to get up to help, he was glared at until he sat back down. He sullenly sat as Toru cooked him breakfast. His mind wandered to what he had found out last night. Yagi Tashinori was either a late bloomer like Izuku was, or he got his quirk just like Mirio did. It was a newspaper that was uploaded, and Izuku had found it was before Yagi's time at UA. The paper did have much, but one small article on a young man who fought off a few thugs with a pipe and then was arrested for vigilantism. He was later released when it came out he was quirkless and didn't break any laws. The name was Yagi Tashinori. He had discovered that in between his third year of middle school and first year of UA, he got his quirk, just like Izuku, but he wasn't so sure that he was a late bloomer like he was. He let that matter drop from his research when he couldn't find any more information on Yagi Tashinori. The next topic was interest, Ms. Maverick. She was a mid-tier hero before Yagi graduated from UA. When he looked her up, she had a basic flight quirk when she started, but at the end of her career, she was stronger and faster than she was reported to be before. She died to an unknown villain soon after Yagi graduated from UA, where he disappeared and made his debut in the USA a few years later. Ms. Maverick's power increases drastically at some point in her hero career. It was too similar to the other two to be a coincidence, especially when they were all connected. The information began to get harder to find as he went farther back to when Maverick got her power up. So instead, he looked up heroes who died with the added parameters that their quirk evolved before they died. He was brought out of his thoughts when Tour set a plate of eggs and sausage with toast before him. She beamed proudly at her work, and Izuku gave her a thankful smile before eating her well-done food. She sat down next to him and ate her plate of food with him. They ate in relative silence and enjoyed having one another close by. When he finished his food, he let out a long yawn that Toru had caught. She quickly washed the dishes and marched him up to his room to lie down for a few hours. He tried to protest that he wasn't that tired, but once he had laid down, he was drifting off to sleep. Toru sat next to him in bed and brushed his messy hair back, and he slipped away. She giggled and got comfortable before grabbing the book she dropped the night before to continue her reading next to a softly snoring Izuku. After his mandatory nap by Toru, Izuku woke up late in the evening to an empty room. He looked around groggily to see his room was organized somewhat, and some of his clothes were neatly folded where they were strewn about in his room. He blushed at the idea of Toru going around in his room and cleaning up after himself. He stumbled out of bed and grabbed a bottle of water that was on his nightstand that wasn't there when he went to sleep. He was even more grateful for his loving girlfriend. He stretched and then pulled out the notes he was working on and continued his research on Ms. Maverick and when she evolved her quirk just like Mirio did. His running theory is that somehow Mirio received a quirk and his only lead from there was All Might. It became almost impossible since the generation before Ms. Maverick was more loose about keeping records, but he was able to find one hero who matched what he was looking for. A regular hero with a simple enough quirk that evolved and granted him enhanced speed and strength. And then he mysteriously died to an unknown villain, which to be fair was more common than he thought. The hero was only known as N. From there, he lost any kind of trail from people evolving their quirks and then dying to an unknown villain. Izuku sat back in his chair and rubbed his messy hair with a sigh. He looked at his notes and read them over to see if he could gain anything from them. Mirio's quirk evolved after All Might came to teach at UA under the guise of retirement. Yagi was previously quirkless, and between his last year of middle school and UA, he got a quirk. Izuku paused and truly thought about the last statement. All Might, Yagi Tashinori, told him to give up being a hero because he was supposedly quirkless, and here he was getting a quirk gifted to him after knowing exactly what Izuku went through. He gritted his teeth and forced himself to continue on his path. He could come back to the hypocrisy of All Might later. Ms. Maverick had her quirk evolved, and before her, and story was the same before they both died to an unknown villain. The correlation between all of them was the enhanced strength and speed that shouldn't have been there to begin with. Yagi played it off as his quirk, but he was born quirkless. Then Mirio received this enhanced strength and speed from All Might after he came to UA. And he guessed that Sir Naitai groomed him to become the second coming of the symbol of peace from their disturbing similarities. Izuku stopped and thought about what he had learned and what he could do with the information. At the moment, nothing, but now he knows that Mirio's other quirk was passed on like a relay racer, and he could pass the quirk to another person. The more he thought about it, the more it was believable with the existence of the quirk boogeyman from the dawn of quirks. If there was someone who could take and give quirks, then why couldn't there be a quirk that has been passed around for who knows how long? There could even be a connection between the boogeyman and the quirk somehow. Maybe there could even be other quirks with the same ability to be passed along or transferred. His phone rang, and he was thrown out of his thoughts. Looking at the caller ID, it showed Fat Gum. He answered it without any thought. Midoriya, how have you been? I've been hearing you've been checking up on the little one. Fat Gum's energetic voice came through the speaker. I'm good, and yes. I visited Eri the day before and was thinking of going again soon. What did you call for? What? A mentor can't check up on his student? No, I jest. I am calling to tell you that both Sunnyators and your work studies will be postponed because of the intensity of the Shy Hasaikai raid. And not just yours, but just about everyone's to make it fair, as they told me. We weren't expecting the raid to be this bad and the possible outcome that could have resulted if something was just a bit off. Fatgum explained. Izuku furrowed his brows. Why would they postpone it? Hero work is unpredictable, and it's our job to control that unpredictably to make sure people are safe. Sure, the raid was a lot for first years, I'm guessing, but that doesn't mean we should take a break. Fat Gum sighed. I agree, but it's out of my hands now. I see. Thank you for having me for the short time we worked together. I not enjoyed it. The smile could be heard as he spoke. Of course. I would be happy to have you back anytime. They said their farewells and hung up. Izuku leaned back in his chair and let out a long sigh. He did enjoy working with Fat Gum and Tamaki to a lesser extent. The hero was what heroes should be and not what more and more heroes are becoming. Izuku sees too many heroes who work for fame and glory in the hero business rather than working on helping people as they should be. That thought reminded him of Stain and what his ideals were before he was taken away. Izuku shook his head from the darkening thoughts and got up to eat something. Heading downstairs, he was met by some of the class in the common room playing games or relaxing on the sofas. He saw Toru and Mina chatting animatedly with Uraraka and Jairu while the guys from his gang were playing on a console hooked up to the TV. Toru saw him and waved at him with a smile. Mina caught the action and teased Toru as the invisible girl pushed Mina's face away as retribution. Izuku smiled back and waved while heading to the kitchen. He made a simple meal of a few sandwiches and sat down to watch from the kitchen as the guys made a tournament within the game. When he finished, he joined them on the couches and continued to watch. Denki tried to rope him into playing, but he declined. He continued to egg him on until he gave up under peer pressure and gave it a try just to end up losing immediately. Hanta sent Denki a dirty glare as he was the one to trounce Izuku without giving him a chance. The rest of the night continued that way until it was time for sleep before the day of class the next day. The class was back in the concrete gym for more super move training. Izuku was sitting down and experimenting with combining energies and seeing their results. He already had his 3 main super moves, and adding more to his arsenal would be for the best. He had an idea for a new energy he could obtain, but he was restraining himself from sprinting right at the person in question. For now, he merged a few energies to see the results, and most of them were less than satisfying. Thermal, electric, kinetic, light, sound, nuclear, stamina, shield, rewind, and bomb were his current options, but more was always good. Izuku got up to find the person in question, but was stalled by Yagi approaching him with a smile. Young Midoriya, how goes your training? Yagi asked. The previous #1 hero was hopeful to see the bridge repaired between the two, but Izuku's next words dashed that hope brutally. Just fine, Yagi, Izuku said coldly. Is everything all right, my boy? Yagi asked confused. Izuku turned back to the emaciated man and observed him for a moment. Why did you tell me what you did on the rooftop that day? He asked neutrally. Yagi sighed and rubbed his neck as he looked away. I said what I thought was best. Did Ms. Maverick tell you the same? Izuku asked with his head tilted. His eyes bore into Yagi as he froze in his motion. Izuku put his hands behind his back and continued to watch Yagi very carefully to see if his research was right. Yagi felt cold as he processed the words, and then looked up sharply at the young man who was watching him with a blank expression behind his half-mask. What do you mean by that? Izuku turned his head to continue watching Yagi as he began to pace around the retired hero. Did Ms. Maverick tell you to be realistic in your dreams to become a hero? Or was she more encouraging to a quirkless teen who wishes for a break from the life that continues to beat him down? Yagi continued to watch the teen with the pit in his stomach continuing to grow with each word. What chilled Yagi Tashinori the most was Izuku's posture and the way he walked. Much too similar to the villain he put down twice. What are you talking about? Yagi acted confused. Izuku could see the sweat beginning to bead around Yagi's forehead and pressed on. I like to research everything and anything that catches my eye. It's been a hobby ever since I was a child. Left to my own devices after being told I was useless, I watched people and documented many things. From behavior to fighting styles to quirks. His eyes snapped onto Yagi's at the last word with intensity. I love quirks. They are fascinating, and I was entranced by the thing I didn't have for most of my life. I like to pick them apart and find every detail I can. I can say if I had never had a path in the hero business, then I would most likely be a quirk analyst. Why didn't you then? Yagi desperately tried to change the conversation. Izuku ignored his question and continued his pacing around the retired hero like a dog circling an injured rodent. So when I see an interesting quirk, then I lock into it and break it apart and see how they could work and how they could be used. When I saw Mirio Togata's quirk, boy was I fascinated by it. To become intangible with the minor side effect that he couldn't see, breathe, or hear while submerged was incredible and had so many applications if used right. But when I saw Mirio in person for the first time and fought him, something just wasn't right. His quirk evolved. Izuku hummed. When I tell you I research quirks, that means I research every little bit of them. For example, my quirk is an extreme evolution of my parents with some mutation added to it. Inko could pull objects to her, and Hisashi, my father, could breathe fire. You could see how those two could make something like my quirk. But Mirio? Izuku shook his head. When quirks evolve, they are linear. That means that they will become more powerful in the same direction that their quirk is already on. For example, Kirishima recently had a minor evolution. His skin hardened even further at the cost of his stamina. If Toru evolved, then she could extend her quirk to others possibly. But gaining incredible strength and speed to intangibility? That doesn't add up. Just like how a quirkless teen could gain a quirk in their 3rd year of middle school. Granted, that's more possible, look at me after all. But a person with a flight quirk gaining strength and speed? Or someone with a smokescreen quirk doing the same? Izuku stopped and faced Yagi, who was pale as a ghost, while looking extremely serious. Why go through all the trouble? Yagi asked steadily. Izuku didn't answer right away. Honestly, he shrugged. Curiosity mostly. But I also like to know who is near me and what their capabilities are. What will you do with this information? At the moment, nothing. But I do like to have plans for everything, just in case. After all, I have to be realistic, right? Izuku turned to leave after getting what he wanted from the man. Is this all from that day? Yagi asked to his back. Most of them, yes. Yagi paused and then. I'm sorry. He was cut off by Izuku turning around with cold eyes. Oh, you are sorry? Is it because I'm a threat to you and your apprentice instead of some quirkless child on the roof? The venom that dripped from his words caused All Might to flinch back. Izuku turned back around and left Yagi standing there alone with a whirl of emotions running through him. He did his best to calm down as he walked away from the symbol of peace. It felt cathartic to go on a rant like that, especially when it felt like a villain monologue before an epic battle. He wonders if the fight between All Might and the All for One had a monologue like that. He ran through the expressions on Yagi's face and his electrical signals as he spoke to him, and everything he gained from the interaction pointed at Izuku being right about everything. He remembered how the low electrical energy in Yagi's mind surged every time Izuku pointed at his findings. By the time he found who he was looking for, he had calmed down enough not to snap at someone unnecessarily. Izuku was wary of trying to take this energy because it was something that could cause catastrophic damage if he didn't realize the consequences of using it like he did with thermal or kinetic. If he absorbed kinetic energy or thermal energy, it would replenish, or there would be no harm in taking it. But some energies could damage something in the long term if he used it wrong or at all. But the more he thought about it, the more confidence he gained in using the energy, since he most likely wasn't the first to use it regularly, and everything seemed fine. Midoriya? Is everything all right? You've been watching me for a while now. Uraraka asked nervously. Izuku snapped out of his contemplation. Sorry, Uraraka. I was lost in thought, but I was looking for you. He unlatched his lower mask and let it dangle down to his chest. Oh, what did you need? Uraraka looked more relaxed and approached him with a smile. Could you use your quirk on me? Izuku asked and held his hand out like he was going to shake hands with her. She tilted her head but shrugged and took his hand, and then his body shimmering for a brief moment. She held on to him just in case. Why did you want me to do that? She looked up at him, now floating above her head. When I gain a new energy, I need to see it or sense it. I've always sensed your quirk negate the gravitational energy on the object you use it on, but I always worried about using it and the ramifications of taking it. But now the longer I think about it, it should be fine. Izuku rambled on and expanded his sixth sense in search of the difference between him and the area around him. His eyes snapped open, and he found what he was looking for. A primal energy that rooted everything and everyone on the earth except for him. Uraraka's eyes widened as she began to float just like Izuku, but she didn't use her quirk on herself. Soon, rocks and dust on the ground began to float as well by her and the area surrounding the smiling green-haired boy. She released her quirk, but everything continued floating away from the ground in a radius around them. Holy SHD, she whispered in awe of the mimicry of her quirk's effects. Izuku continued to smile and slowly stopped absorbing the new energy that settled in his core. He hummed in satisfaction at the successful experiment as they settled back on firm ground. Thank you, Uraraka. If you ever need my help with anything, I'd be happy to do so, he said seriously as he locked eyes with her. Uraraka nodded apprehensively and looked away while fidgeting with her hands. She looked back and asked, You help the others with their quirks. Mina, Toru, Hyuka, Kaminari, and Shiro. Can you do the same with me? Izuku smiled broadly and nodded happily. Of course, I'd be happy to, but that doesn't count as the favor you helped me with. Uraraka smiled back in relief and gave him a nod. Thank you, Midoriya. Show me your quirk on a few objects and yourself. She nodded with determination and went over to the large concrete blocks she had been using a moment ago. She tapped a few of them and some smaller stones on the ground. Izuku got close and watched everything with his newest sixth sense. He furrowed his brows and then looked at Uraraka. His eyes furrowed further at seeing gravitational energy in her body. Drop everything and use it on one object, he instructed. Izuku watched Uraraka's body dispel the gravitational energy and the blocks regain it from the area around them. She went over and tapped one block, and Izuku watched in fascination as for a small moment the energy in the block transferred from the block and into Uraraka. He asked her to do it again, and the energy built up inside her. He asked her next to use it on herself, and oddly enough the same thing happened, but the energy inside her body was riled up. He had known of Uraraka's weakness of using her quirk on herself, which caused her intense nausea, and prolonged use on other things caused the same. Izuku motioned her down and asked, What does it feel when you touch something to use your quirk? Like a pulling sensation? Izuku had his hand cupped around his chin, but his eyes glimmered at his theory. Uraraka looked a bit surprised and nodded vigorously. It does. She was excited as she could tell her classmate figured something out in such a short time. You're just like me. She looked confused and he explained. When you use your quirk on something, the gravitational energy is sucked into your body. When I use my quirk, I do the same and release when I want. But you contain the gravitational energy of the object you touch, which causes it to float. The reason you get nauseous when you use it on yourself is that the energy moves around inside your body in a loop. You took it away, but it's still inside you, thus the nausea, he explained excitedly. Uraraka looked like she was having the revelation of her life. So if I. She went over to the blocks and then tapped multiple ones and then held the last one in her hands. She furrowed her brows in concentration. Push instead. Her finger pressed hard into the concrete. Suddenly, the concrete shimmered again, but dark purple instead of the usual pink. The concrete block slammed down with incredible force, causing the ground to spiderweb under it as it continued to push down with the force of multiple concrete blocks into one. She shrieked in surprise and jumped back. Izuku looked excitedly at his successful theory and the dense energy contained inside the concrete block that belonged to the other concrete blocks that continued to float. He looked over to Uraraka to see her looking at him in complete euphoria at having discovered a completely new aspect of her quirk. He smiled widely back at her and then waved goodbye to play around with the new energy that was all around him. Do be careful if used on a person. Also, keep an eye on your limits. This might drain you faster than how you've usually used your quirk. With that, he left. For the rest of the week, Izuku played around with his newest energy, and boy did he have fun floating around. Of course, his friends joined in floating around with him when he told them about the primal energy he had gained. He practiced using gravitational energy to fly to some degree. He absorbed the energy around his body and used small kinetic blasts to move him around like pressurized gas in space. It did take him many trials and errors to figure out the mechanics of it, but he was on his way to being able to fly. When he wasn't practicing with the new energy, he visited Eri. The next time he did so, he brought his friends like he told her he would. He invited Uraraka and Tsu as well since they were part of the raid and were eager to meet the girl. Eri was very shy in the beginning, but slowly calmed down at their easy personalities. Tsu was very drawn to the girl since she was the same age as her sister. They hung around her when they got the chance, and she grew more relaxed around them as time passed. Eri was still most comfortable around Izuku when people were around. She began to regain her health bit by bit every time Izuku visited her. Back at the school, Izuku was trying to use gravitational energy to stop clones of ectoplasm by sending them crashing into the ground with controlled bursts of increased gravity. It wasn't precise like his lightning or fire beam and was more like a ray that increased gravity where he aimed. It was extremely effective in downing anyone that got near him and a great non-lethal attack. He was taking a break when Denki approached him with a grin. "Hey Izuku, I've got an idea." Izuku stopped drinking his water to eye his friend with suspicion. "What? Have you ever seen any old animes?" "Not really." "What?" "Well, in some, there is a training method that they use by working out in a high-gravity area. I was just wondering." Izuku paused, unsure. "Denki, I don't think that's a good idea." "Oh, come on. We'll start slow, and I'll walk into the range." Denki looked excitedly and motioned him to stand. "What are you two doing?" Sato asked. "Something stupid and dangerous, probably," Izuku said. "I'll be fine. Izuku can increase the gravity and dash." "I'm in." Sato cut him off with a serious face. Izuku shook his head at the two and sighed in resignation. He scorched the ground in a cone shape with the narrow where he stood, and then increased the gravity in front of him by a small degree. "Go ahead." He waved in front of him. The two grinned like idiots and stepped inside the cone. They buckled slightly, but stood straight after a second. They moved around to get used to the increased gravity and then grinned at Izuku. "More!" The two shouted in unison. Izuku pursed his lips, but obliged by increasing the energy output. The two stained to keep upright, but they slowly did so. Denki activated his quirk and strengthened his body with electricity, and Sato brought a bag of sugar to his mouth slowly as he fought against the increased difficulty. When they were done with their preparation, they tried to spar, but it was at a quarter movement speed at most. Soon, more of his classmates joined in to watch the two try to spar, but they were more interested as to see why they were so sluggish. Denki was sweating buckets as he gave up his fight against Sato and made his way to exit the increased gravity. When he did, he stumbled out and took in a breath. That was intense. He gasped out. Sato followed him and fell to his knees next to him. "I feel like I benched, squatted, and curled a truck." "What's with them?" Toru came up to Izuku. "They were inside the increased gravity for training, I guess." He shrugged. "Increased gravity, you say?" Kirishima appeared next to Izuku in a flash. Kirishima, Shoji, and Ojiro were next in the field, and they struggled just as much as the other two in their attempt to fight against the primal energy that was gravity. Kirishima cheated a bit by hardening his joints, but the weight was still on his shoulders. Shoji manipulated his arms slowly around while Ojiro went through a fighting routine with difficulty. By the end, they were all in a similar state as Denki and Sato when they got out. "You guys done having fun?" Izuku asked with a raised brow at the five on the ground. "Don't you look at us with those judging eyes." Denki groaned. "Have you tried it out?" "Of course not. I'd just collapse. I'm not made for strength." Izuku shrugged. He sensed a new presence getting close, and he had a good feeling about who it was. "Are you all going to continue wasting time?" Aizawa's voice came from behind Izuku. Izuku looked over his shoulder at his teacher and then turned back around to most of his class. He gave them a brief nod and walked past them to a spot to continue his experiments with his quirk. The class broke apart to continue their training. The class was very aware of Izuku's dislike of their homeroom teacher, but no one ever brought it up to discuss it. As he sat down, he still felt the eyes on the back of his head as he made ball of energy combine. He didn't acknowledge the underground hero as he merged the effects of fire without gravity or with increased gravity. "Nizu wants a word with you." Aizawa finally spoke. "Tell him I'm going to sell the information if he is afraid of me doing so." Izuku didn't turn to speak and continued to work on his quirk. It wasn't a request. Before Aizawa used his quirk on the boy, he was shrouded in the void. He shot his capture weapon at Izuku, and it wrapped him up for a moment before his back incinerated the part holding him. "I was always curious as to how this worked," Izuku said, holding up the part that wasn't burned away to his eyes. "The minor mutation that causes your hair to float comes from your father, and the quirk erasure from your mother, but this is something different," he said absent-mindedly. Izuku held on to it and got up, walking past an irate and shocked Aizawa. He said, "You should get more sleep," and drained some of his stamina away to make him stumble from the intense drowsiness. Instead of going to Nizu's office, he went to an open field so he didn't cause collateral damage to anyone nearby in the gym. He continued his experiments by absorbing the gravity in the area, which caused him to float with any loose debris coming with him. He pushed anything away from him by releasing a small amount of kinetic energy in every direction and began. First, he began with small streams of compressed thermal energy as a form of propulsion. It worked and it launched him into where he wanted, but he miscalculated and began to spin. He then overcompensated, which caused him to spin more erratically. He huffed in slight frustration, dropping from the air and absorbing the fall. He lay on the grass and stared into the cloudy sky in thought. He sensed another thermal signature and looked over to see Mirio walking over to him with a stiff smile. "Mirio," he greeted and sat up. "Working on a movement technique, I see. It's always hard and embarrassing at the beginning. I remember when I first worked on mine, I crashed into so many walls." He laughed at the memory. Izuku let him ramble on and try to start a conversation, but didn't say anything. He knew he wanted to speak about his secret. Mirio looked down at his underclassman when he didn't hear anything from him and saw him staring at Mirio with curiosity. "All right, I suppose you have an idea why I'm here," he said while his smile dropped and his laughter petered out. "You were waiting in Nizu's office, and when Aizawa told him I wasn't coming, you came to me instead of him or Yagi. I'm guessing." He shrugged casually. Mirio was reminded of how similar Midoriya was to Sir Nightai with his analytical mind. "You and Sir are eerily similar. What's it called?" "That I'm sorry?" Mirio asked, confused. "The quirk, what's it called?" Mirio paused and felt his fingers go cold at how much Midoriya truly knew of the legacy he took. He remembered how much All Might and Sir emphasized how much the secret was worth. He debated with himself and finally told him. "One for all." Izuku nodded slowly and immediately connected the dots between the boogeyman of the first era and the quirk. He could even guess that the mysterious villain that killed every past holder was All for One. Did All for One kill the previous holders of One for All? He sighed and rubbed his neck. "You sure know a lot." "Yeah, he did." He paused and asked, "Why go through all that effort to find answers?" He finally asked what he was sent out to ask. "Curiosity." He shrugged. "I like quirks, and yours wasn't right. The more I dug, the deeper it went, and I like to know things about people around me, especially from people who hold lots of power, whether that be political, physical, or anything in between." "Why? Wouldn't you want to know everything about possible threats?" He asked as it was obvious. "Possible threats? You believe me to be a threat?" "Everyone you gathered information about." Mirio asked with slight offense. "Anyone and everyone could become a threat. That's very cynical." Izuku shrugged and got up. "That isn't bad, it's what you do with it. Did you come for what you wanted? Or did you have more questions?" His eyes were drawn to something odd about Mirio, and he stared. He let out a long sigh. "Why do you hate All Might so much? He's done so much for Japan. He's a hypocrite," he said absent-mindedly, and stared more intently. "What do you mean?" "Yes, All Might is a great hero and has good morals. But Yagi Tashinori was born quirkless. He knew what it was like to be beaten down, but he left me on the roof after telling me to give up on being a hero. And then he continued to defend the same student who told me to kill myself the same day, even after he was arrested, and he is still in my class." He explained calmly. His eyes stopped glaring at Mirio and went back to what he was trying to figure out. Mirio had heard of what All Might did to Midoriya, but not the rest. He had to once again look at the previous #1 hero in a new light. As far as he knew, Midoriya wasn't one to lie, and that dug deeper into his views on the hero. He was going to speak again, but noticed Midoriya's eyes not on him, but something on him. "What is it?" he asked, confused. "Mirio, does anyone in your family have gray hair as a mutation?" "What?" He was thrown off kilter at the sudden question. "Not that I know of. Why?" Midoriya hummed in thought and cupped his chin. After a moment, he approached Mirio and plucked a hair from his head. "Ow. Hey, you're graying at a young age. Heavy stress? Or something else?" He showed the strand of hair that was blonde at the tip and gray at the root. Mirio stared at the hair in his hand and took it, examining it. "Is there more?" He tilted his head down so Midoriya could see. Izuku checked and saw that most of his roots were beginning to gray. "All of it." Mirio looked uneasy at the response. "I don't think I'm that stressed out." He ran his fingers through his hair. "You think I'll turn out to be a gray fox?" He tried to joke, but the laughter that came with it was forced. "You should go see a doctor, Did Yagi's predecessor, Ms. Maverick, have any adverse effects of having two quirks? I've never heard of anyone with two quirks, other than All for One and the Nomo, and how they could affect the person. I'm sure there have been experiments, but... He trailed off with a shrug. Those were hidden away somewhere probably. Mirio continued to look more nervous as he spoke. I don't know much about her other than All Might looked up to her. He pulled his hand out of his now messy hair and looked at the few strands that came with it. Some were blonde, and more were gray at the root, like Midoriya said. I need to go. Izuku watched him turn on his heels and begin to walk away stiffly. His eyes turned to the figure at the window that was watching him. It was Yagi, and he had a frown on his face at seeing his successor's actions. Izuku shrugged and turned back to his training. He wanted to find a way to become a jet fighter. He smirked to himself at the thought and began to float again. The week after Mirio came to talk to Izuku went by without any incident. Izuku visited Eri at the hospital with his friends. Her eyes lit up when she saw the group every time they came through the doors. She has been slowly gaining a healthy amount of weight, and the doctors have been saying she will be free to leave soon. Izuku was happy for her recovery. During the weekend, Izuku took Toru out on a date to enjoy themselves. It was a simple affair of going to a mall and going for a walk in the park. It wasn't anything special, but the two enjoyed their peaceful time together. Toru brought up the idea of the whole group going out together as they did before. Izuku was happy to do so when they got the chance. Finally, Monday came and Izuku was again called to Nizu's office. The absorber sighed and went to meet with the principal. He knocked on the door and it opened to see Nizu behind his desk and Aizawa on the couch. Seeing the usually disheveled man reminded him to look closer at the support item he took from Aizawa. Midoriya, come in. Would you like some tea? Nizu greeted jovially. I'll pass. What is it you wish to discuss? He didn't sit down and waited. Very well. He let out a small sigh. I want to know how long it took you to find what you did. His beady eyes flickered to Aizawa and back to Izuku. Izuku raises a brow. A day and a half. This wasn't what you wanted to talk about, is it? He knew it wasn't from the brief look he gave to Aizawa. Truly. Nizu sounded surprised at his answer and went over the question posed. What got your research started? He asked in curiosity. His yearbook. Nizu's eyes flickered side to side as if he were reading the yearbook. He slowly began to nod in understanding at his process. He typed in his computer for a moment and sat back after briefly reading what was on the screen. He turned back to the student before him. You would have been a great detective. Izuku didn't say anything and waited for him to get to the reason he was called to the office. He knew it wasn't about one for all since Aizawa didn't know from his glances between the two. Very well. The main reason I called you in here was to inform you that young Eri will be released tomorrow. You said you wanted to guide her to control her quirk. Is that still true? Nizu asked with his paws steepled before his snout. It is. I'm guessing Aizawa to help in that regard. Very astute. Yes, Aizawa will help or watch over her when you are unable to or otherwise. As you know, he would be just as capable of handling her quirk as you can. All her necessities will be acquired for her very soon, and she will have a room attached to eraser heads in the dorms. Her education? Izuku asked. I will be tutoring her. I have enough free time to do so, Nizu responded. Does the commission know about her? Izuku asked. Nizu stopped from continuing to answer anything he said and processed what he had asked. In an even tone, he asked, Why do you ask? I don't trust them. And if there is a chance to have a quirk under their control that could bring someone from the dead, then they might do what they can to get their hands on her. What makes you distrust of the Hero Commission? Nizu asked carefully. Izuku looked back with a raised brow. It took me less than 2 days to find what I did. I did a lot of research before UA. I didn't have too many friends as you can imagine. That combined with my curiosity about finding what I shouldn't led me to some interesting things. More so when I came here and got to interact with the son of the number 2 hero at the time. Oh, Nizu probed. Where did Hawks come from? He asked simply. And who did he replace? Nizu smirked and nodded. The commission knows a raid took place, and we rescued a child. They know UA is taking her as a ward. They will suspect something. There is nothing to do about that unless we forge a fake quirk registration. It wouldn't be hard. Izuku mumbled, but Nizu's ears twitched at hearing it. Was there anything else? No, that will be all. I wouldn't mind having you return to discuss less pressing matters over a cup of tea. Nizu offered. Izuku thought about it and nodded. All right. He was curious about what the two could dive into as a discussion. Wonderful. Anything I can help you with? Nizu clapped his paws together with a smile. What of Mirio? Nizu's smile fell just a bit, but Izuku caught it. Nothing to worry about. The absorber nodded and headed out of the office. Aizawa stared at the door he left through and could only think of what else he could know if he knew to distrust the Hero Commission. He was reminded of how the absorber knew about his parents' quirks. On top of that, Nizu kept something hidden about Mirio which the absorber knew and caused Yagi intense distress when he saw him last. So, this was the end of Part 9 of this series. Stay tuned for next part of this series, and if you like this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.